I hope one day you'll understand that love isn't enough. That was the last thing he said before he walked out the door. No dramatic slam. No shouting. Just that calm, calculated line, like a teacher giving a final lesson, and the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. I didn't run after him. Not because I didn't want to. My body was practically humming with the instinct to beg. But I couldn't move. My legs were cemented to the hardwood floor, my fingers clutching the edge of the counter like it could keep me grounded in a life that had just vanished. Everything felt still, too still. Even the refrigerator, which always hummed a little too loud, had gone silent like it too was in mourning. He left me with nothing. Not just emotionally. Literally. The rent was overdue. The power bill stacked behind the microwave unopened. The car was in his name. So was the apartment. All I had was my half-empty wardrobe, an almost dead phone, and a body full of exhausted memories. I stood there in the kitchen barefoot, heart disintegrating in slow motion, wondering how someone could look you in the eye one night, tell you you're their future, and the next morning vanish like you were a layover they regretted booking. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood. Until I saw it. An eviction notice taped to the door. Dated 3 days ago. He knew. He knew and still left. That was when the shaking started. I dropped to my knees and pressed my back to the fridge, breath shallow, the floor cold against my skin. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. We'd been together for 3 years. He said he wanted forever. I believed him. I followed him to another city. I quit my job to help him build his startup. I shrunk my world down to fit inside his dreams. And when things got hard, when money ran thin and investors walked away, I stayed. I stayed. And he left. Not just left. He blamed me. Told me I didn't bring enough to the table. Said I lacked drive, that I didn't inspire him anymore. I remember the way he looked at me, like I was a math problem he couldn't be bothered to solve. Not angry. Not emotional. Just done. Do you think we fell out of love? I had asked, voice trembling like a frayed wire. He just stared at me for a long moment, then said, I think I outgrew what we had. I don't remember what I said after that. Or if I said anything at all. My brain went static. Like someone had unplugged me from reality and left me there, blinking in a quiet storm of disbelief. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I packed a duffel bag with whatever I could carry, some clothes, a few books, my old laptop. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The apartment was full of him. Of us. Of ghost laughter and Sunday pancakes, and the way he used to touch my face like it was art. All of it now tainted. I spent that night on a friend's couch, pretending to be okay. Smiling through tight lips. Saying things like, it's probably for the best, when all I wanted was to scream, why wasn't I enough? 3 days passed. Then a week. I applied for jobs I was overqualified for. Ate instant noodles. Used the library Wi-Fi. Told no one what happened. Because how do you admit you gave your entire life to someone who decided it wasn't worth keeping? It wasn't until the 9th day that the call came. I was walking out of a coffee shop with a half-full cup I couldn't afford when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something told me not to. Hello? I said, breath fogging in the cold air. Is this Eliana James? I froze. That name, my full name, felt foreign. I hadn't heard it spoken like that in years. Yes, this is Amanda Barnes. I'm calling from the law offices of Hallstein and Rivera. We've been trying to reach you regarding the estate of your aunt, Deborah James. My heart skipped. My aunt, I said. I haven't spoken to her in years. Yes, well, she passed away last month. You were listed as the sole beneficiary in her will. We need to schedule a time for you to come in and discuss the details. I think you have the wrong person, I stammered. No, Miss James. We're quite sure. You've inherited her estate. That includes a property in Westwood Hills, several high-value assets, and a stock portfolio. We'll need you to come in to review everything. I blinked. Stumbled to sit down on the nearest bench. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would she leave me anything? That's something we can discuss when you arrive. Would tomorrow at 10 a.m. work? I said yes, but I barely remember the rest of the call. When I hung up, my coffee was cold, untouched. The world felt off kilter, like I had just been pulled through a hidden doorway and dumped into a reality that didn't belong to me. My aunt and I weren't close. I hadn't seen her since I was 18. She was the black sheep of the family, wealthy, eccentric, always traveling. My mother rarely spoke of her, but she used to send postcards. Notes written in strange, elegant handwriting. "You are more than they let you believe," she once wrote. I'd forgotten those words until that moment. Now they rang in my skull like a prophecy. He left me with nothing. And the universe, in some twisted stroke of irony or justice or fate, handed me everything. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt numb. I wanted to call him, to scream the words he didn't wait to hear. But I didn't, because part of me wondered. If he knew, if he ever found out, would he try to come back? And if he did, would I be strong enough to let him stay gone? The first time I saw him, I was 17, balancing a tray of cafeteria food and trying not to trip over my own shoelaces. He was sitting with the seniors, surrounded by laughter and a kind of ease I'd never been able to fake. He didn't notice me that day, not really. I was just another background blur in his charmed life. But I noticed him. Of course I did. Everyone did. He was the kind of boy who carried gravity like it was stitched into his collarbones, pulling people into his orbit with a smile and the soft arch of a brow. Back then, I thought that meant something. Back then, I thought I could mean something to him, too. Our story didn't start with fireworks. It started with math tutoring. He failed algebra, and I was the only junior in the top 10 percentile who didn't already hate him. He slid into the seat beside me like he belonged there, like the world owed him a space in every room he wanted to occupy. "You're Eliana, right?" he asked, pen tapping the table. I nodded, cautious. "Think you can help me not fail this class?" I should have said no. I should have walked away. Instead, I smiled. Maybe. He showed up to every session. At first, he made jokes, flirty in that effortless, distracted way. But as the weeks passed, he started asking questions about more than math. About books, music, my life. No one had ever asked about my life before. I didn't realize how starved I was for attention until he gave it to me in small, precise doses, like medication he knew I'd grow dependent on. We kissed 2 months later. It was behind the bleachers after school. My heart was a war drum, my palms clammy, but he cupped my face like I was something soft and rare. "You're different," he murmured. I was too breathless to ask if that was a good thing. He didn't make it official until after graduation. By then, I'd already written essays about our future, journal entries about our imagined apartment, the children I wanted, the way I thought we'd grow together through life like ivy clinging to stone. Instead, we grew apart. Slowly, at first. Like a rope fraying at the edges. The first year of college was okay. We both stayed local. He chased a business degree and startup dreams. I studied communications, always careful not to talk too much about my own ambitions. He said he loved how supportive I was. I wore that word like a medal, not knowing it was the beginning of my undoing. The cracks showed more in year 2. He worked long hours on a project that never seemed to launch. I took night shifts and skipped meals to pay our bills, but he called that doing what needed to be done. He stopped asking about my day. I stopped offering. When I brought up grad school, he changed the subject. When I brought it up again, he sighed and said, "Let's focus on getting my thing off the ground first." I should have pushed back. I should have asked why his dreams mattered more. Instead, I nodded. Of course. That was the thing about loving him. It made me quieter. Smaller. I didn't even notice it was happening. He started coming home later. He stopped kissing me goodbye. I told myself it was stress. Startup pressure. But deep down, I knew the shine was fading. And I was the one going dull first. Then came the night I bled through my jeans in the bathroom of our apartment. No warning. Just pain and blood and something pulling out of me. I sat on the cold tile, doubled over, and realized I'd missed 2 periods without noticing. The ER nurse was kind. Said it was probably a chemical pregnancy. Early. Unstable. "These things happen," she said. I didn't even know I'd been pregnant. I didn't tell him. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew the answer. He would have blamed me. Or worse, he would have felt nothing at all. After that, I changed. Not all at once, but enough. I stopped laughing at his jokes that hurt. I stopped skipping dinner just to have something hot waiting for him. I started writing again, in a notebook I had under my pillow. I dreamed about leaving. About what life might look like if I stopped orbiting him and found a son of my own. But I didn't leave. He did. He said we were in a rut. That he needed space. That I'd lost the fire he used to love in me. I wanted to scream. To tell him I never lost anything. He took it. He doused it. He made me feel like being ordinary was a sin and loving him was the only redemption. But I didn't scream. I just asked, is there someone else? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. He packed that night. Took the car. The savings. The life I helped build. He left me with nothing. And as I curled up on the mattress we once shared, in a half-empty room, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, I felt the full weight of it. I had no home, no job, no love. And still, somehow, I was free. At least, I thought I was. Until the next key twist I never saw coming. I started over with exactly $147 in my bank account, 2 suitcases, and a bruised soul that hadn't figured out how to breathe without looking over its shoulder. The friend who let me crash on her couch for 2 weeks had a roommate who hated me. I could feel it in the way she slammed cabinet doors and left passive-aggressive sticky notes on everything from the microwave to the milk carton. So I packed my bags again and found a room to rent in a house filled with strangers, the kind of place where you shared a bathroom with 2 other women and prayed the water stayed warm long enough to wash off the day. I took a job waitressing at a dingy cafe downtown where the coffee was always lukewarm and the customers tipped like it was charity. My feet hurt by hour 5 every shift, but I smiled through gritted teeth and sure, I'll bring you more ketchup, like my dignity wasn't slowly disintegrating beneath the soles of my non-slip shoes. I didn't post online. I didn't text anyone. I deleted every photo of him from my phone, but somehow I still saw his face in the curve of strangers' jaws, in the silhouettes of tall men passing under streetlights. I hated myself for missing him, for flinching when I saw couples holding hands like I used to, back when I thought hands were promises. The nights were the worst. That in-between time after work when the noise faded, and I had to sit with the quiet. It asked questions I didn't want to answer. Was I ever really loved? Did he ever see me as more than someone convenient? If I vanished tomorrow, would anyone even notice? I began keeping a journal. I filled pages with questions I couldn't voice out loud. Pages with my anger, my confusion, my need. And somewhere in the margins, I started to find myself. She was shaky, unsure, but she was there. The girl I used to be before he rearranged my sense of self-worth to fit his own mold. I applied for jobs in marketing, my original field, without hope, just habit. Most didn't respond. The ones that did wanted more experience, more software skills, more of everything I hadn't been allowed to grow while I was too busy being someone's unpaid assistant, chef, and emotional punching bag. I stopped going on social media entirely. Every scroll was a punch to the gut, his new life, her perfect hair, their photos in places I once dreamed of visiting. It wasn't just that he moved on. It was that he thrived without me. Or at least, that's what it looked like through the curated lens of Instagram. He took her to Rome. He bought her a car. He smiled like he never even knew my name. But then came the letter. Handwritten. In thick, looping script I didn't recognize. Mailed to the cafe, which startled me more than anything, who even knew I worked there. It was from my aunt's lawyer. The follow-up to that strange phone call I almost dismissed as a scam. We hope to see you in person to finalize the inheritance process. I had to reread the sentence 3 times before it made sense. I didn't even remember what she looked like. My mother had called her eccentric, unstable, the kind of woman who wears fur coats to brunch and collects ex-husbands. I only remembered the postcards she used to send when I was little. Bright colors. Quotes from books. And one that said, "You are not the chaos you were born into." I hadn't thought about her in years, but suddenly, she was the key to a life I didn't even know was waiting for me. The next morning, I stood outside the law office with my coat buttoned all the way up and my nerves coiled so tightly that I thought I might unravel just from stepping inside. The receptionist was kind. The lawyer was younger than I expected, with a firm handshake and eyes that never quite stopped moving. He laid it all out for me in clinical terms. I was the sole heir to her estate. A large house on the east end of the city, 2 vintage cars, a modest art collection, stocks in a biotech company I'd never heard of. "It's all yours," he said, sliding the papers across the desk like they didn't weigh 1,000 pounds. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt surreal. Like I was being punked. Like someone would jump out any second and say, "Gotcha. Back to your broke, pathetic life." But no one did. It was real. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, blinking at my new reality, and thought, what would he say if he saw me now? And, even worse, would he come back? The question haunted me. Because as much as I wanted to slam the door on that part of my life, some tiny splinter in me still wondered what it would feel like if he chose me again. If this time, I was the prize. I didn't want that. But I did. And that was the ugliest truth of all. The house didn't look real when I first pulled up the gravel driveway. It stood there like something out of a novel I never thought I'd be written into. 3 stories, tall windows with black frames, ivy climbing up one side of the brick, and a porch that looked like it had heard generations of secrets. I remember sitting in the back of the cab, my breath fogging up the cold window, staring at it like it might vanish if I blinked too long. The driver looked back at me and said, "You sure this is it?" As if even he couldn't believe someone like me belonged in a place like this. I nodded. Yeah, I guess I am. The first time I stepped through the door, it smelled like wood polish and old books. The kind of scent that wraps around you like an expensive coat. It didn't feel like home. Not yet. But it didn't feel like a stranger either. The lawyer had warned me, it's been empty for a while, but it's structurally sound. Your aunt had someone maintain it. As I walked through the rooms, the library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, the study with gold-plated lamps, the bedroom with a walk-in closet bigger than my old apartment, I realized what wealth felt like. Silence. Space. Freedom to exist without justifying yourself. I spent that first night on a couch in the study, too overwhelmed to sleep upstairs in the master suite. I wrapped myself in a wool blanket that probably cost more than my college tuition and stared at the fireplace, even though I didn't know how to light it. I felt small in the best and worst way. Like the universe had finally handed me a chance, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't tell anyone. Not even the few acquaintances I still kept in touch with. The world had already written its story about me, the girl who got dumped, disappeared, and was probably still scraping by somewhere with dreams as dead as her relationship. I wanted to keep it that way for now. I wanted to grow in secret, the way seeds do before they split open and bloom. In the following weeks, I hired a financial advisor. I met with an art appraiser who nearly fainted when he saw 2 of the paintings in the front hall. I found a therapist. A real one. The kind who didn't judge the way my voice shook when I admitted I still dreamed of him. Of the way he said goodbye. Of the cold in his eyes that matched the air on my skin when he left me on that doorstep with no key, no car, and no home. "Do you still love him?" she asked once, carefully. I didn't lie. I don't know. Because it wasn't about love anymore. It was about residue. The kind you can't scrub off no matter how hard you try. But I didn't wallow. I worked. I transformed. I learned how to cook properly, not just to please someone else, but to nourish myself. I started taking classes online in brand design and digital marketing. I reactivated my social media, but not as her, not the version of me he had shaped with his hands and expectations. This time, I was building me. I created a portfolio, a brand, a name. People started noticing. First, a lifestyle magazine reached out after seeing my redesigned home office on Instagram. Then a boutique skincare company asked if I could consult on their aesthetic. It was small money, but it was mine. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like a placeholder in someone else's story. I was writing my own. But the universe doesn't let you ascend quietly. Not for long. He showed up again on a Thursday. I'd just come back from a Pilates class, my hair messy, leggings still damp from sweat, grocery bag dangling from my arm. He was leaning on my gate like a ghost with perfect posture. My breath caught. Not because he looked different, but because he didn't. Same smirk. Same jawline. Same dark coat he used to throw over my shoulders when the wind picked up. Eliana, he said like a benediction. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't know how. He opened the gate without asking. I hated that my heartbeat skipped in rhythm with his steps. You're a hard woman to find, he said, stopping just before the stairs. Not really, I replied, voice flatter than I felt. He looked around. Up at the house. Let out a slow whistle. This is yours. Yes. He raised an eyebrow. Guess I underestimated you. The words landed like glass on tile. I set the grocery bag down. Why are you here? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. Then said, I thought about you. A lot. I made mistakes. I stared at him. And in that moment, I remembered the girl on the floor of our old kitchen, clutching her chest like her heart had cracked open. And I realized he was standing in front of a woman he didn't know how to talk to anymore. Have you eaten? I asked. He blinked. What? Have you eaten? I repeated. He shook his head, confused. I nodded toward the house. Then come in. I didn't do it to be kind. I did it because I wanted to look him in the eye when I decided if he still deserved a seat at my table. And the truth? Part of me wanted to see him try. Because now I was the one with something to lose. And he was the one with everything to prove. He sat at the edge of my velvet dining chair like it might swallow him whole. The irony wasn't lost on me, how out of place he looked now in the kind of space he used to daydream about while dragging me through the gutter. His fingers tapped against the wood of the table, too fast, too unsure, a metronome for guilt he hadn't yet learned to wear convincingly. I poured tea in silence. Loose leaf. Jasmine. From a set my aunt once bought in Kyoto. The smell drifted between us like a question I wouldn't ask yet. I didn't offer him sugar. I didn't offer him anything. I thought you hated tea, he said, voice quiet. I used to, I said, and left it at that. He didn't know me anymore. That was the most satisfying part of all of this. The way his eyes kept darting over my kitchen, my clothes, my skin, like he was searching for the version of me he left behind. The one who wore oversized sweaters, who always said yes before she'd even been asked. She was gone. And I wasn't sure I wanted to introduce him to the woman who replaced her. So, I said, pulling my sleeves up, what is it you want, exactly? He blinked. I wanted to see you. I tilted my head. Why? He hesitated. I heard things. Through old friends. About the inheritance. I didn't flinch. And that made you what? Nostalgic? He smiled then. That crooked, charming grin that used to unspool me in seconds. It reminded me of what we had. No, I said. It reminded you of what you lost. The grin faded. You think that's all this is? He asked, suddenly sharper. You really think I'd crawl back just for money? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His silence after that was damning. He took a sip of the tea and winced, like it burned. You're different, he muttered. I had to be, I replied. He looked at me then, not just with his eyes, but with that calculated hunger I remembered from the last 6 months of our relationship. The one he wore when things were slipping out of his hands. When he wanted control back. I know I hurt you, he said, but people make mistakes. You're not the only one who suffered, Elle. I laughed. Not loudly. Not mockingly. Just surprised. You left me with $38 in my checking account and an eviction notice taped to the door. I wasn't in a good place either. You weren't in a moral place, Caleb. He looked away. I leaned back. Crossed my arms. What happened, huh? She dump you? Did your startup fail? Did you realize you couldn't build an empire on arrogance and good hair alone? That one stung. I saw it land. Good. He didn't answer. But his silence was loud enough. I stood then, walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the trees swayed. Wind whispered against the glass. Why now? I asked, not turning around. He exhaled hard. I missed you. I miss us. There is no us, I said, finally turning to face him. You ended that the moment you decided I wasn't enough. His jaw tensed. I never said that. No, you just implied it. In every ignored text. In every passive-aggressive sigh. In the way you said nothing when I cried in the bathroom after working double shifts so you could chase a dream that never included me. He stood suddenly, hands splayed on the table like a man trying to anchor himself. I made mistakes. I got caught up. I thought you'd wait. I stared at him. I did wait. The silence between us was electric. Dangerous. The kind that could burn if you weren't careful. He stepped closer. I still remember how you looked when you slept. How you'd tuck your hand under your cheek. How you used to whisper my name in your sleep sometimes. Like, even in your dreams, you loved me. I swallowed hard. Because damn him, he knew how to use words like daggers. But I was done bleeding for him. You remembered all that, and you still left, I said. So, what exactly do you expect me to do with this memory you're selling me? He blinked, unsure how to respond. And for the first time, I saw it. The power shift. It wasn't just emotional. It was visible. Tangible. I wasn't the girl trembling under the weight of his love anymore. I was the woman deciding whether or not to let him breathe in the air I'd reclaimed. I should go, he muttered. Probably. He turned to leave. But at the door, he paused. If you ever want to talk again. I'm staying at the Milton Hotel. I nodded once. Then closed the door behind him. But I didn't lock it. Not because I wanted him to return, but because I wanted the choice to slam it shut myself if he did. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, not this time. It wasn't grief that kept me up. It was something sharper. Something less romantic and more dangerous. Clarity. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that conversation with Caleb. Every carefully chosen word, every half-truth laced with nostalgia. I wasn't naive anymore. I heard the tremor in his voice when he saw the house, the way his eyes flicked to the watch on my wrist, to the painting in the hallway he probably Googled later to confirm the value. He hadn't come back for me. He came back for what I represented now. Security. Wealth. Redemption. He thought wrapping his betrayal in poetic regret would be enough to blur the edges of what he did. But I remembered everything too clearly. I remembered the morning he forgot my birthday because he was pitching to investors. I remembered when he told me, no one wants to hear about your little blog during dinner with his friends. I remembered the way his jaw tightened every time I mentioned wanting more than what we had, like ambition was a crime unless it came from his mouth. And I remembered the silence after I told him I might not be able to have children. He never even asked if I was okay. I woke up the next morning with a fire in my chest. Not rage. Resolve. If he thought he could weasel his way back into my life because he sensed I had something to offer now, then maybe it was time to show him that I was no longer a girl he could twist with half smiles and long apologies. I reached for my phone and texted him. Coffee. 2 p.m. The Elmwood Lounge. His reply came faster than I liked. I'll be there. Of course he would. I wore a silk blouse the color of storm clouds, tailored jeans, and the heels he once said made me look too tall to be soft. I wanted to look like a threat wrapped in grace. I wanted him to feel the shift before I even spoke. He was already seated when I arrived, wearing that same camel coat he used to wear when we were broke. It looked cheaper now, like it belonged to a man trying too hard to remember who he used to be. Eliana, he stood up, grinning like a reunion scene was unfolding, like this was the start of something rekindled. I sat without returning the smile. You look incredible, he said. Thanks, I replied, sipping the water the waitress had already set down. He tried small talk. Asked about the house. My new business. Even commented on a feature he'd read about me online. I let him speak. I watched the way he leaned forward, the way his hands gestured too much when he got nervous. You've built something amazing, he said finally. I always knew you would. I didn't know how to support you back then. No, I corrected, you didn't want to. He faltered. You liked the version of me who clapped for you while my own dreams dried out. I was young. We both were. You were selfish, I said, tone cutting through the cafe's hum. And you haven't changed. His jaw tightened. I came here to apologize, not to be judged. Then you came to the wrong woman, I said, leaning in. Because I'm not a priest, Caleb. And forgiveness isn't a confession away. He stared at me. And for once, didn't try to argue. After a beat, he said, I messed up. I got scared. I thought, you were too comfortable being second best. My brows arched. And you thought leaving me with nothing would motivate me? He shook his head quickly. No, I thought if I cut ties, you'd stop holding me back. There it was. The truth, raw and bleeding. I let it sit between us for a moment. Then said, I never held you back. I just stopped letting you step on me. Silence. He looked down. Picked at the napkin. I'm not here to take anything from you, he murmured. I want a second chance. To do it right this time. I tilted my head. Because you love me? He nodded. Or because you hate the idea of me thriving without you? His eyes flicked up. And in that moment, I saw it. The answer. It wasn't love. It was loss, but not the loss of me. The loss of control. Of being the one who had more. The one who was needed. I stood. You're not getting a second chance, I said calmly. You're getting a seat at the table, just long enough for me to figure out if I want to watch you walk away again. Only this time, it'll be my choice. He didn't move. I pulled out a check from my purse. Folded it in half. Set it on the table in front of him. For the money you emptied from our joint account before you left. With interest. His eyes widened. I didn't expect. No, I interrupted. You never do. I walked out before he could speak again. My heels clicked on the tile, a rhythm of closure. Outside, the wind felt sharp but honest. And for the first time in a long time, I felt taller than him, even from a distance. I invited him to a dinner party the following week. Not because I wanted him there, but because I wanted him to see the world I'd built in his absence. I wanted him to sit in a room full of people who knew me not as Caleb's ex, but as Eliana James, a creative consultant, a businesswoman, a woman with her own orbit. I wanted him to feel like the outsider. The way I had felt for years when I stood next to him while he pretended I didn't exist when someone more important walked by. He arrived 10 minutes late. Of course he did. Wearing a blazer that was one season behind and a cologne that used to smell like safety and now just smelled like memory. I greeted him with a polite smile. Nothing more. Wow, he said as he stepped into the foyer. This place looks incredible. Thanks, I replied, already turning toward the kitchen. Come meet everyone. There were 9 guests. A mix of designers, entrepreneurs, writers, and 2 former clients who had become dear friends. People who talked fast and laughed louder, who toasted with ease and complimented each other without envy. I watched him watch them. He lingered behind, hovered near the wine station, smiled too tightly when someone introduced themselves. He wasn't used to being the least interesting person in the room. At dinner, I sat at the head of the table. Not because I needed to assert dominance, but because I belonged there. The conversations floated around business trends, travel stories, and creative projects. People asked my opinion. People deferred to me. And Caleb? He sipped his wine and nodded, but his silence was a shade too dark to be casual. At one point, Noah, a tech founder I'd recently collaborated with, leaned over and said, You know, Elle, you're going to have to start charging double soon. Everyone wants your eye. I laughed. Don't tempt me. Caleb's fork scraped his plate. Subtle, but loud enough to signal the discomfort he tried to swallow. Later, while dessert was being served, my friend Serena asked, So, how do you two know each other? Her eyes flicked between Caleb and me, genuinely curious. Before I could answer, Caleb jumped in. We used to date. There it was. So blunt. So sudden, like he wanted to rip the curtain open before I could control the narrative. Oh, Serena said, glancing at me. That must have been a while ago. Caleb smiled. Feels like another lifetime. I sipped my wine. It was. The air cooled. Just for a second. And then the moment passed like a cloud over the sun. But I saw the flicker in his eye. That need to reestablish proximity. to mark old territory. After everyone left and the laughter faded into the clink of empty glasses and soft jazz from the speaker, Caleb stayed behind. I should help clean, he offered, grabbing a plate. You never used to, I said, not unkindly. Just honest. He chuckled. Touché. We moved through the kitchen like dancers who hadn't shared a stage in years. Close, but off rhythm. You've changed, he said finally, rinsing a wine glass. You carry yourself like I own the room? I offered. He nodded. Yeah, because I do. He dried the glass slowly. I'm glad you're doing well. Are you? I asked, voice quiet. He hesitated. I'm trying to be. That's not what I asked. He looked at me then. Really looked. Not with desire. Not with nostalgia. But with confusion. Like he didn't understand how I had become this version of myself without him. I leaned against the counter. You thought I'd wait for you to figure it out. That I'd be stuck in a loop, reliving what we had until you were ready to come back. He didn't deny it. But here's the thing, Caleb. I didn't grow without you to prove something. I grew because I finally had room to. He put the glass down. I want to try again, he said, voice low. For real this time. My breath caught. Not because I didn't expect it, but because part of me still wanted to believe it, even after everything. And that scared me more than anything else. So I stepped closer, looked him in the eye, and said, let's talk about it next week. There's something I want to show you first. He smiled. Hope bloomed in his chest. And I let him believe it. Because the game wasn't over yet. But this time, I was the one dealing the cards. The thing I wanted to show him wasn't a place. It wasn't a gallery or a project or a new wing of the house. It was the truth. I spent the week preparing for it like I used to prepare for his birthday dinners, meticulously, with lists and timelines and perfectly folded plans. Only this time, the gift wasn't something wrapped in ribbon. It was a mirror, one he wouldn't be able to look away from. I picked a cafe downtown for our meeting, public enough to keep things civil, intimate enough that he'd have nowhere to run once the words started to spill. I wore a sleek black dress, minimal makeup, hair tied back. Clean lines. No distractions. I wanted his full attention. He was already seated when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me, that familiar half-smile tugging at his lips. You look like someone you used to underestimate? I said, sitting down. He chuckled nervously. I was going to say radiant, but sure. That works too. We ordered drinks. Small talk was minimal. He complimented my latest media feature. Asked about an interview I'd done. I nodded along, keeping the conversation polite but emotionally detached. I was no longer interested in hearing him pretend he was proud of me. That pride should have been present when I had nothing. When the drinks arrived, I folded my hands on the table and looked him dead in the eye. I did some digging this week, I said softly. His expression shifted. Barely. A flicker of defense in his brow. Digging? He asked, casually. I was curious, I continued. You said you missed me. That you regretted everything. That you wanted to try again. He nodded slowly. So I talked to some people we used to know. Ran into Jess, remember her? He nodded again. Slower. She mentioned your startup failed. That you're in debt. That you've been sleeping on your brother's couch. His face went still. And that you only reappeared after she told you about my inheritance. Silence. Dense and undeniable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I needed to hear it from someone else, I said. Because if I'd asked you directly, you would have lied. He leaned back, jaw clenched. It's not like that, isn't it? I said. You didn't come back for me. You came back for the idea of me. For what I could give you now. That's not true. Then tell me, I challenged. Tell me what you remember about me. Not the me who throws dinner parties and makes magazine covers. The me you left. Tell me my middle name. He stared at me. Blank. I smiled, cold and calm. I didn't think so. His mouth opened, then closed. Words dying in his throat. You always wanted someone impressive, I continued. Someone who made you look good. But the moment I stopped being useful, you threw me away. That's not fair, he said, voice tight. You don't know what I was dealing with. You're right, I said. Because you never let me in. You just expected me to hold space for you while you emptied me out. He looked away. I leaned forward. You don't love me, Caleb. You love control. And you lost it the day I realized I was more than the version of me you curated. He blinked fast, like he was trying not to let it show. The humiliation. The unraveling. You think you've changed, I said. But you haven't. You're just desperate now. And that's not love, it's survival. The check came. I paid without asking. He followed me outside, hand catching my elbow. Wait, Elle, please. I turned. Slowly. No anger. No bitterness. Just clarity. You left me with nothing, I said. And now that I have everything, you think I owe you a second chance. He said nothing. You don't get to rebuild your life with the bricks you tore from mine. Then I walked away. And this time, he didn't follow. He just stood there. Alone. The way I once did. Only now I wasn't broken. I was whole. And he was the one left wondering how it felt. There's a silence that comes after closure, strange, humming, almost unfamiliar. Not peace exactly. Just the absence of ache. That's what the next few weeks felt like. I didn't see Caleb again. He didn't call. Didn't text. No grand gestures, no begging at my gate with rain pouring down like the movies promise. He just disappeared, quietly and completely. Maybe for the first time, he finally understood that I wasn't going to open the door again. Or maybe he just couldn't stand the mirror I held up to him. Either way, I didn't look back. Instead, I turned inward. I threw myself into work, not to avoid feeling, but because I finally had room to. I signed 2 new clients, one of them a major skincare brand with global reach. I hired a small team. I woke up each morning with a sense of purpose instead of panic. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just becoming. I took weekend trips alone. Paris, Lisbon, Kyoto. I took photos, drank coffee on balconies, learned how to say thank you in 6 new languages. I left pieces of myself in every city, traded pain for perspective. And one night, in a small bookstore in Amsterdam, I met him. No, not him. Not Caleb. Not someone trying to fix me or mold me or collect me like a prize. Just a man. Kind. Quiet. Eyes like early spring, thoughtful and warm. His name was Adrian. He asked me what book I was holding, and I told him the truth. I didn't know. I just liked the cover. He smiled. That's a good enough reason to start anything. We talked for hours that day. About poetry. Family. Grief. The things we'd lost and the things we'd built to survive it. He didn't ask for my story right away. He just listened to the parts one chose to give, one chapter at a time. He didn't flinch at the messy ones. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't want to. He just held space. And that felt like the rarest kind of love. We didn't fall fast. We didn't fall loud. We unfolded. He wrote me notes on napkins. I took pictures of him when he wasn't looking. We spent an entire day walking the city in silence, holding hands like teenagers who didn't know how to speak yet. And one night, weeks later, curled up in a blanket on his rooftop, he said, "You don't have to be brave with me." I cried. Not because I was broken, but because for the first time, I didn't have to pretend I wasn't. I didn't tell him about Caleb right away. He never asked why I flinched at certain phrases, why I shut down when he got too close too fast. He just waited. And when I did tell him, when I finally laid it all out, the betrayal, the abandonment, the manipulation, he didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He just reached out and took my hand. "You don't owe him anything," he said softly. "Not even your pain." And something inside me cracked open. Not like a wound. Like a window. I started sleeping better. Laughing louder. Not in performative ways. Not for anyone else's comfort. Just because. Because I finally felt safe in my own skin again. Because I finally understood that the love I needed had never been conditional. It had just been missing. And now it wasn't. The best part? I didn't need Adrian to heal. I was already healing when I met him. But he reminded me that I could be whole and held. That I didn't have to pick one. That softness wasn't weakness. It was survival. I didn't plan on seeing Caleb again. But life is cruelly poetic sometimes. It was spring, nearly a year since he'd last stood at my door. The city was waking up, trees blooming, cafe patios filling with noise and light. I'd just launched my personal brand series, a project that had taken 8 months and every sliver of emotional bandwidth I had left. It was a campaign rooted in identity, in voice, in reclaiming the narratives women are often too scared to say out loud. It was honest, raw, messy, beautiful. It went viral. Not in the cheap, 15 seconds of fame kind of way, but in the soul-piercing kind. People wrote to me. Strangers, mostly. Women from other countries, small towns, big cities, telling me my words sounded like their diaries. My pain had a twin on the other side of the world, and somehow that made it sacred. I was walking out of a panel discussion I'd just led, one about creative freedom and reclaiming your voice after trauma, when I saw him. Across the street, leaning on a lamppost like the ghost he was always destined to become. My heart didn't jump. My stomach didn't twist. I felt nothing but stillness. But my body still knew him. I met his eyes. He crossed the street slowly, almost unsure. For a man who used to move with such confidence, it was strange seeing hesitation in his steps. Eliana, he said, voice quieter than I remembered. Caleb. He smiled weakly. You're everywhere these days. I shrugged. I'm doing what I was always meant to do. I read your essay, he said after a pause. The one about starting from nothing. About losing yourself in someone else's dreams. My throat tightened, not with fear, but memory. I didn't use your name, I said. I know, he nodded. But I recognized myself anyway. There it was. The admission. No excuses. No spin. Just truth. We stood there, two people with too much history and not enough future. I deserved worse, he said. I just wanted you to know that. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch, let it breathe. I thought I'd hate seeing you again, I finally said. But I don't. He looked at me. I don't feel anything at all, I added. His face crumpled only slightly. A flicker of pain crossed his features, but he swallowed it. That's fair. I loved you, I said. More than I should have. And you used that love like it was currency. I know. And now that I've learned how to love myself, I don't need to spend it on anyone who doesn't earn it. He looked down. I didn't expect you to take me back. I know. He stepped back then. You look happy. I am. He nodded. I wanted to say goodbye properly this time. I tilted my head. You don't need to say it. You already did. He gave me one last look, one that lingered like dust in the air after everything's been burned down. Then he turned and walked away. No drama. No begging. No redemption arc. Just a man finally realizing the door he once slammed shut had never been his to open again. I watched him disappear into the crowd. And I didn't chase him. Didn't even turn around. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a message from Adrian. He'd texted earlier. Dinner tonight? I miss your sarcasm already. I smiled. Because I wasn't standing at the edge of heartbreak anymore. I was already somewhere else. Somewhere he couldn't follow. Somewhere I had built from nothing, brick by beautiful, painful brick.